drawing at the end, so if you would like to get into the drawing, please put a business card up here. I hate spam as much as the next person, so you will get one and only one email, and that will be to send you both a link to the slides and also a checklist that did not make it inside the slides because it was too long and not quite formatted properly. So if you'd like that and you want to win the book, give this man a card. We'll pull it at the end. So, and with that, let's get going. This is about free and open source software, not FOSS, but FOSS, as in, how do you actually make money in a world where you give away the product? And it's one of those challenges where you're kind of boldly going down the rabbit hole, where once you've made your first sale, all of a sudden everyone has your source code, and what do they need you for anymore? And so it's, how do you set up a business and set up, in essence, a revenue model that works well in this business? In the world of open source, we're out there saving the world one website at a time, one web service at a time, whatever it takes to keep expanding the marketplace for us. And so it's a worthy cause. We're all donating our time to different open source projects. Some people are paid for it, not everyone is, but everyone does tend to contribute back in some way. And so there needs to be a way to kind of make all that work for you. So we're going to hit a number of different topics today. We'll go through a little bit of just the basics. So let me ask you just real fast, how many of you are thinking about doing a new startup? You're not there yet, but you're thinking about it. Okay. How many of you are actually in the middle of a startup? Okay. How many of you are working for somebody else and kind of scratch your head? Maybe you want to go there, maybe you've got a good idea, but you haven't really thought about how to start. Couple. Okay. Then we'll go through some of the real basics of some of this, because it's the things that will come to bite you along the way that if you don't anticipate them, that they can hit you in a little while. One of the things I'm kind of a stickler on is the role of a business plan. A lot of people put a lot of stock into it. I have to tell you that unless you're going for funding, nobody really needs it, because the business plan all of a sudden loses all of its value the moment you meet your first customer. That's when all those assumptions you made go out the window, because they'll tell you what they really want. So business plans are a challenge. But there is one technique, one different tool that's out there called the Business Model Canvas. And that will be in the distributed links. This is a very visual one-page business plan done very graphically. It's a tool that's being used a lot in the lean startup models, in a lot of the different incubators now, just because it defines the relationship between things you have to do as a core part of setting up your business, things you can have other people do, things you can outsource, things that you can relationships that are not critical to you. And so it helps you kind of set a laser-like focus over what you want. So it's a wonderful tool. It's called the Business Model Canvas. We'll then get into what it is that drives you to want to be in this business. And it is about finding your passion. Ultimately, we'd all like to make money. And this is kind of an interesting little graph that compares how startups work at different phases. And a lot of people I've talked to don't quite know the terminology. They hear people talk about mezzanine funding and Series A and things like that, and going, oh, you're going for a seed round, and they're not quite sure where they are in the sequence. So this kind of paints that picture of where you start at the idea stage and you're working by yourself. You figure out the just right number of people to join with you as kind of equal partners, and you may form a partnership or some sort of a joint venture along the way right there. At that point, whoever that group is, you've got a pool of all the ownership yourself. And then you start peeling that off. You give away some of your ownership, you give away some of your control in order to be spending somebody else's money instead of your own. And that's the reason why you're bringing in other people. It usually starts with family and friends, and most of the advanced funders will not even talk to you until it looks like enough people that are in your personal sphere of friends were convinced enough to invest in you that they see that if you're trusted by enough other people, then there's a reason why they should look at you as an institution. You can't skip that phase. Just about every one of the lenders out there at the angel phase is looking to see who else is playing, and they want to see that you're not only you are personally invested, but there's other people that have chipped in there and believe in you enough and know you well enough that they're willing to trust you. If you can't get your brother to invest in you, why should they? That's pretty logical. Next step up, you're getting to your seed round. And that's where you're finding your angel investor, 1 or 2 people. And the amount of money here is a lower level of money. I'm going to flip down to the second half of this chart. This is actually a full 8.5 by 11 sheet. So I'm just dropping down. What we're going to do is see what's underneath that seed round. And under that seed round, what the person we're talking about is an angel investor. And they typically are someone that has $1 million to invest in a portfolio of things. And they're typically looking at putting around $200,000 in any one project. So they're staying diversified. They don't want to lose everything they've got on one investment. And so the people that play in that space typically are the millionaires who've got that much disposable money ready to share out. Then as you start moving up the ladder, you move to the venture capitalists. And these are people who are in the business of investing in kind of mid-stage projects. You may not have your product yet. You may not have gotten to full market yet. But this is the point where there's enough promise, there's enough emphasis in the project that they're ready to see where it's going to go. And they see that you've got traction, you've got some marketplace starting to show interest, and so they're ready to take you to the next level. And you're giving up more of your share at that point. And then finally you're getting to the investment bankers when they're taking you public and so forth. And now you're getting to really a major size investment. The big point out of this whole chart is in this line right here. 100% of nothing doesn't pay off too well, anywhere near as well as 70% of a big company. And you're going to keep peeling away until you're down to that little tiny share that seems small, a mere 17% of something that was your nest egg. Yet to get there, you've been spending somebody else's money, being able to hire a significant number of staff, trying to build up product distribution and so forth to get there. So it is worth going to that stage. And that's why you make the investment. It's why you choose to give away pieces of it instead of staying bootstrapped, in essence, working out of your own money. The drawback of working out of your own money is, first of all, when you go down, you go way down. You're 100% invested, and therefore you get 100% of your own loss. So that can be bad news. Recognize that Utah has the highest number of failed startups in the country. It's one of the statistics that the Governor's Office of Economic Development is not very proud of. But on the other side, the reason why they got the highest number of failures is they've got the highest number of startups. So this is the most entrepreneurial state in the nation. And so there's a lot of activity here, and there's a lot of support for entrepreneurs. And so that's why it makes sense to start spending somebody else's money to in essence grow faster. The other thing it does is let you be nimble. You get out of the starting box a whole lot faster. There's nothing like being able to hire 10 good programmers to work in parallel to develop your product instead of you staying in the closet for 10 months. You can't really scale that direction. We know that you can't go massively parallel programming. But you can do a lot of break apart and get a number of things subbed out to get projects out of the starting box faster. So that's the whole point. So how do we get started? First of all, there's the legal part. This is sorry, I'm going to put you a little bit to sleep with some of this, but this is the painful part that you all need to know about to get started. You got to get legal. And in this state, there's some steps that you have to go through. Fortunately, this state makes it fairly easy. There's a number of things that are helpful. One is that there is a website at utah.gov that is the one-stop starting point. In this one website, one form that you fill out, as long as you're not too complicated of an organization, it will end up getting you your federal tax ID number, setting up your state business sales tax license, setting up your articles of incorporation, getting them registered with the Secretary of State. You can have a going business in about 24 hours. So it is an amazingly fast process if you're going through one of the more simpler structures, such as an LLC. So you can do a single member LLC this way, you can do a partnership this way. Number of ways to set up extremely fast. So it's a great way to get out of the starting box. If you're not prepared, if you've got a more complicated business, you've got a more complicated partnership agreement, or you're doing a more complex corporate structure, then you're going to have to send your documents into the Secretary of State, and then you're talking a matter of weeks to go through the approval cycle as opposed to a day. So it's just, this is just a very straightforward process if you can take advantage of it. At the end of this, you get one of these. You want one on your wall. If you don't collect sales tax, I've got to tell you, life will be miserable for you. The penalties of failing to collect sales tax on taxable items comes to haunt you with some very serious penalties. I have a friend who got surprised with a $220,000 tax bill that they did not expect in their second year of business because they didn't realize that what they were doing was taxable. So get to understand what is taxable and how it fits to your business. If you deliver something, then more likely than not you just became taxable. The best example is photographers who do the shoot and burn technique. They're artists. They're just taking digital pictures, and all they do is creating digital files. They're not printing anything. They're not handing over a canvas. They're just giving the person a CD with all their pictures on it. Well, that CD may have cost $1,000 because it was 2 days of photography. That CD is taxable for $1,000. A physical item was delivered, and so it's therefore all the services were taxable because they're all part of that complete delivery. So just take the time to understand the tax laws because they can come to haunt you. If part of what you're doing is going to be embedded on a chip, it's going to be delivered in a product, the software is as taxable as the hardware. So if you actually sell them as two separate pieces, software separate, hardware separate, and you leave it to the customer to put the two together, then the software isn't taxable. So, and that's some of the tricks that some people do. So there's people out there putting out Raspberry Pi packages where you buy the Pi from one person and then you buy the software kit from another, and that way you're avoiding sales tax on the software. So, but if you put both of them together, you've made a taxable event, and the whole package becomes taxable at that point. Moving on, you also need to go see your county and get a business license. They're not very expensive. They typically are $35 to $55. But if you don't have one, life gets pretty miserable for you. That's actually an opportunity for you to go to jail. Finally, is to recognize that it doesn't matter what kind of business you're in, you probably need business insurance. Until you have set up your business, there's a pretty good chance that your homeowner's insurance will handle another programmer visiting you at your home and slipping and falling, or if your computer was stolen out of your car, if you've got a computer addendum on your homeowner's policy. But the moment you have a business license, you are now a business, and the homeowner's policy does not extend to any business property that's held within the home. You need to have a business policy. And so if someone walks away with that wonderful NAS array that's got your life's work on it, and he goes out the door, and you don't have a business policy to cover it, you're out of luck. Hopefully you're backed up off-site. Same idea, if someone slips and falls on your premises because they're there for business, now you've got a business liability. You go to a conference, someone trips over your booth and your pop-up display, and they get hurt. This is how you can lose all your assets. So you do need to have business insurance. It's not very expensive. Like Beehive is $240 a year. It's not a lot for a solopreneur style business, but it's worth having if you're out there having a presence. And the final one in the formation stage is if it's multiple people involved. You're getting in bed with somebody else, and you're forming a partnership or something similar to that. Sorry about that. You need to have kind of all that stuff figured out in advance. There are many, many instances I have seen where people have started a business together on a handshake and have this general idea that, I'm going to be putting in, spending the money on these things, and you're going to be putting in your sweat hours on these things, and everyone's bringing things to the table, working hard with this general idea you're just going to kind of equally share. But as time goes by, you're not really equally contributing. And then all of a sudden, you have revenue. And then when you have revenue, you have arguments. Well, gee, I fronted all the money to get all the computer hardware. We need to pay that off first before we split any of the profits so that we can actually pay our rents. That's when those disputes start to happen. So you need to figure all this out up front and actually get an agreement in writing between you before you actually start investing into the business. That is the easiest time to, in essence, work up the prenuptial agreement. of how things will be separated or how things will wind down. How one of you can buy out the other one if you lose interest, or how to take someone out of the picture if they're, you just find out that their code sucks and it just doesn't hold up to style and commit standards. So things happen along the way. This is the time to figure it out early while you can. And finally, there's the economic side of it. You need to be setting up your banking accounts. So business banking is one of the things to have. I have no relationship with Zions Bank, but they are one of the people who just put up a new program for entrepreneurs that I was pretty impressed with. I just heard about this a week ago, so I stuck it in here to share it. They have what they call the Elite Entrepreneur Program. It is not promoted. You have to know about it to ask for it. And you'll have the contact information for the guy, Mike Winder, as in Winder Farms, and also previously mayor of, I guess, West Draper. But he is now working for Zions Bank doing their Elite Entrepreneur Program. The main thing that caught my attention on this is this particular package of relationships they are bringing to you. Discounted memberships to various organizations, access to health systems, to insurance systems, Silicon Slopes, all the different Boom Startup, all the different incubation organizations that are around. So it's kind of networking on steroids. So this is one of the great opportunities I think you can take advantage of to get started. So a good relationship to start with. All right, we got the nasty part done. Let's do the fun stuff. Gotta have a name, gotta have a logo, gotta be flashy. Who knows who this is? Call it out.
Nike.
Louder.
Nike. Rolling Stones. NBC.
AT&T.
Yahoo. Microsoft. Apple. Android. Facebook. Twitter. Drupal. Joomla, yeah. WordPress. Oh, you took open source.
Openwest, all right. Kind of fun, and not a word in there. All visual logos, except theirs I cut off. So it's, in coming up with your branding, it's actually one of those early commitments that creates a first impression that you really want to spend some time on. It is worth investing, getting someone who is a branding artist to come up with simple, elegant designs like this that stand the test of time, that get this visual recognition. All the logos you look through, very simple. Typically they're two color, one color, just line art, very, very simple structures. If the logo gets too complicated, it's not memorable. It's not distinctive. So spend some time with a good logo artist to get that done. And there's plenty of good artists out there that know how to do this. And a number of services. I mean, you can go to Fiverr and forgot the name of the other service. There's a design company that you put up, I think it's $60 and you'll get back 100 design ideas. Just start farming it out and get some fast stuff back. And every now and then you'll find a gem in there. And if you're really investing in a serious business, then you spend the money for a serious logo design artist. Finally, you spend time also on what your business name is. And naming is, it's going to be with you an awful long time, so it deserves its effort. But more importantly is making sure it's clear of trademark issues, both for your name and your logo. It is not enough to just simply check the phone book and check Google to see if another business exists with the same name. You need to actually do a full trademark search and make sure that no one's got a preemptive registration of the name. And then to hold on to your own name, you do want to do your own trademark filing. You can do a preemptive filing before you're in business to, in essence, put a placeholder on the name so that nobody else will take it from you. And then when you are finally in business, you can go through the completion of your registration process. Federal trademark registrations run $275. It's not a lot of money. It's not bad. You can do the forms yourself. So it's you don't have to use a trademark attorney to do that kind of stuff. I've filed them for the open source projects that I've worked with. So it's not a difficult process. But you do want it. It is amazing how important that gets when you're working in a global economy, especially with online software. So your brand is going to show up in every country, and The definitive date that's most important is your filing date in your home country. So your US filing date will actually preempt activity happening by people in your community in other countries. I'm active with the Joomla project as their trademark and licensing manager. And we are in a lawsuit right now in China because somebody took the US registered trademark and filed it as their own in China. And just a perfect copy. It's violates both copyright law and trademark law. They've got a perfect copy of our logo filed in China, filed 5 years after we filed it in the United States. We didn't make it on trademark matters, and we're appealing on copyright violation because it is a verbatim copyright, and China recognizes the Berne Convention. Went through a similar kind of action in Portugal a year ago, where when the Joomla project was announced in 2005 and the name came out, one of the local community members figured, oh, I'm a member of the community, therefore I can register the name. Well, yeah, they registered in their own name, and we had to get it back from them. And at that point, they became adverse to it. So you have to kind of be first out of the starting box, and it makes sense to file not only here in the United States, but also the European community. So in the EC, you can file one application, and it covers all the EC countries. So those two are the ones that I tend to start with working with projects. Open source projects are always works in progress. It's kind of the nature of things. So as you're now turning back to the setting up of your business, is to recognize that you need to be fluid. It is to recognize that instability is part of your business. You're in a moving marketplace, you have a moving product, and you're probably working on a moving product base. That you're dependent on other libraries and other things. And getting to that point where you've got perfection doesn't work. Done is far better than perfect. If there's one thing to take away from there, it's that phrase. Done is better than perfect. And it's, I've seen more and more projects get stalled out because of that. Next is free and open source software is defining the word free. Free is in the four freedoms of the GPL, free is in a whole bunch of things, or is it truly free beer? In the CMS market space, all those projects give away their core software. It is free as in gratis. And so you can download Joomla, WordPress, a whole bunch of others. Everything on GitHub is free, as in no charge. So how do you make a business model out of this that you get paid? The usual way that I see for people who are in the secondary market, the people who are actually building websites using open source software, is they're selling service. They sell service or support. So in the WordPress world, people make plugins and they make themes. They are selling that as a package. They can charge for the package. Once it's out the door, though, people are free to copy it and send it to their friends. That's part of the GPL license. But if you want to call for support, you want to send in an email, you want to get someone to log into your website and help you out, you better pay for it. So that's how you catch up. So you take on a service model, you take on a support model, you take on an education model. So Open Source Training is an excellent company that services the Drupal, WordPress, and Joomla markets. Phenomenal training. They compete with lynda.com in terms of having a better specialized library of training for the 3D CMSs. Very good at what they do. And they've got an inventory of video that is thousands of hours long. And it's well worth their memberships. And that's how they make their money. So they make money on the training side of things, on the video assets that they've collected, as well as how they deliver people. Speaking of that, there is a website that you may want to get to know. This will be in the checklist that I'll send it out afterwards. It's called Creative Live. CreativeLive, creativelive.com. They have a wonderful model that they have been following in the education space. And the reason why I recommend it is because they are frequently producing training for entrepreneurial businesses. They have studios in San Francisco as well as Seattle. And they teach everything from how to use Photoshop, how to build your own WordPress website, how to sell yourself, all kinds of, if there's been a new business book written about it, they get the author on the stage doing 3 days of live training. If you're a photographer and you want to learn how to shoot landscapes, they tether up a best in the world photographer so that you see through their lens what they're composing, and they narrate as they're actually shooting, and so that you actually see and experience how they compose a shot. What's magical about what they offer is that typically for the photographers, they do a 3-day program where they're having the best baby photographer in the country for 3 full days on camera. The first day will be how they actually promote their business. So it is Entrepreneurship 101. It is how do you market? How do you send flyers out? How do you market through email? How do you use social media? How do you do relationship building? Day 2 will be the actual photography, which if you're not into being a photographer, you tune out of. Day 3 then will be how they sell. So how they do a live sale, how they pitch the client, how they pull the emotional triggers. And it is amazing to look across all the different entrepreneurial businesses and watch the day 3 of their programs and see how similar some of those pulls are. How they use, particularly their websites, their online media, to promote whatever it is that they're trying to bring out. And how they pull in the ability to make the sale. There's a new open source project called Mautic, M-A-U-T-I-C. It is short for Marketing Automation. It just hit version 1 software 2 months ago. They are trying to beat HubSpot at its own game using completely free software. So you can go to Mautic and sign up for an account at Mautic.com, which is their hosted version, or you can download the software and put it on your own server from Mautic.org. And the software gives you that 1 by 1 pixel tracking pixel that you can stick into anything. It's not limited to just your emails to determine open rates. It goes into social media, it goes onto web pages, it goes into any place you want to figure out where someone has gone before you figured out who they are. So it is meant to be a universal tracking device. So that by tracking IP address and requests and a few other things that are unique in the request, they know who somebody is and they follow all the footprints and how many times they anonymously visited your website and how much time they spent on various pages until they finally convert and you know who they are. And then you know, all right, this is the demographic of this customer. What did I learn from them? Why did they get stuck in the sale? How can I improve them? So Mautic is a rather interesting piece of software and worth looking at.
How do you spell it?
M-A-U-T-I-C. .org or .com. Open source licenses. The big elephant out there is the GPL. And that is the one where you are looking for people to contribute back to your software. And it has its challenges sometimes in larger environments. So CMSs as end user software as kind of the last stage of the development. CMSs can use libraries that are under most of the other licenses. You can stick an MIT licensed library inside a GPL CMS and not have an issue. But you cannot take a GPL piece of software and stick it in something else without it getting what's called the GPL. The whole project becomes a derivative piece of software and therefore must be GPL licensed. It forces people to keep contributing back, forces people to keep sharing the software. That's the whole design of the GPL. But it has its marketing limitations. So the other side of that is you may be developing a library that you want to see used in something else. A package that would go into Symphony, for example. Those you tend to want to use LGPL because that does not have the taint. It does not disrupt whatever it's used in. It can go inside a proprietary product. It can go inside of a chip and not cause everything on the chip to suddenly become open source. So just be aware of your different licenses and what you can do with them. We don't have time to go through the chart of which one to choose. It's a complicated process, and if you've got a specific project you want to talk about, catch me after, and I'd be happy to help you navigate the maze. But understand that you need copyright. When it comes to things like this, copyright happens. The moment you have put one sentence on a piece of paper The moment you have typed one line of code, it is copyrighted. There was a change in the copyright law that happened 2 decades ago that it used to be you had to put C in a circle in the date and claim it as copyrighted. And if you didn't do that, it was in the public domain. Now there's no such thing as things in the public domain unless you're a government entity. Things don't just automatically fall into the public domain. They are copyrighted the moment they're created in this country. So you license everything. So if you're participating in an open source project, you will have signed a contributors agreement transferring the copyright to the project. Then the moment you write it, okay, you created a copyright, the copyright's in your name, but it also was immediately licensed to the project by submitting a pull request. So as you're creating your own software, as you're creating your own product for use, keep in mind that you need to license it from the beginning and figure out what license it's going to go out under. Because once you start to license something, you can't really pull it back. You can't take something that you've already put out to the community as, say, GPL, and then change it to MIT. Doesn't happen. You can dual license. You can have 2 versions of the software. You as the author can do 2 things with it. You as a community, if you've got a community, if you get everyone to sign in, everyone in the community can decide to dual license even after the software has been written. But you got to get everyone to sign the document, and that's a painful process. So figure it out up front. It's a whole lot easier. Let's get into designing that business. You've got your good ideas on the table, and thing that I can't drill into anyone's head enough is the idea of MVP. Who knows what MVP stands for?
Minimum viable product.
Minimum viable product. Absolutely. Yeah, you've read the books on lean startup and so forth. Follow this. I've seen so many people get too big with their project and fail because they can't get out the door. They can't find their first customer because they haven't narrowed down to truly what it is that makes this product tick. Go find your marketplace, go make your first sale, learn from your first sale because your customer will change your mind, it will change your direction, and get out the door and manage by walking around and meeting those customers. You need to find the one thing. Curly's got it figured out, you've got to figure it out. There is one thing about your idea, your corner of the marketplace that's going to tick. And you've got to set a laser-like focus on that. And to everything else that comes along, you need to learn how to say this word. To everyone who comes to you with a good idea, including your customer who just paid you good money, you've got to know how to say no. You've got to know how to stay on your laser-like focus and realize that keep expanding the scope, and all that scope creep will kill your business the same way as it'll kill any individual project. So don't let scope creep happen. There's a lot of creeps out there. Figure out what your awesome sauce is and make it happen, because that is what you want to follow. You want to get into market, you want to get into market fast. The sooner you're out there in market, have presence, and actually start the process of developing your business and bringing all this out, that's when you're finally going to realize what truly is your awesome sauce. It may not be what you thought it was at the beginning. Now you finally figure out where to invest all your resources and what things you can spin off to other people, what you can outsource. Resources. I'm a member of Impact Hub. Just joined it on Salt Lake. It's a beautiful facility, great co-working facility. The picture is actually not the Salt Lake facility. I didn't have pictures of theirs handy. But this is a wonderful place to go meet people and bounce your ideas around. $35 a month for a drop-in membership where you can just come in for the social events, come in, co-work, take up a table, sit on the couch. But most importantly, there's people there from Bitcoin, from the Utah Governor's Office of Economic Development, Boom Startup, all types of entrepreneurial businesses are there. The electricity in the building is huge. And if you want to get an acid test of where your idea is going or get more resources, it's a perfect place to drop in. It is a wonderful place where people are very open source minded. They live the open source lifestyle. They share their knowledge with each other. It's a great place to help test your ideas before you spend a lot of money. And it makes sure they're going to work. Also, open source communities. What you're building is dependent on a project. It is amazing how people who are core members of those projects will be helpful to anyone who's trying to do a derivative product. Joomla itself has 8,000 different extensions that have been coded by individuals or small teams to solve vertical market niche issues. WordPress is what, 6,000 different plugins and themes. I mean, there's huge communities that are out there, and they all have been through this. They all want to get, they've all been through the startup phase. They've all learned the hard way of what it takes to get going. And so, go learn from these people. They are phenomenally helpful. I would appreciate you going on to join in a moment and rating the talk. It does help because I do actually get out on the speaker circuit. People like to see the ratings. So there is the join in number to see how I did. So please take a moment to do that for me. And tell me, what are your issues? What didn't I hit? Questions, comments?
So, is there any way to use open source to protect intellectual property?
Use open source to protect intellectual property. I'm not quite sure I'm going to follow that.
Like, maybe, would you be able to release a project as open source to claim, like, basically prove that it's your work, and so maybe patent trolls have a patent for the same thing, or I don't know, like, if you can't fight those court battles, like, would you, like, be able, I don't know how to phrase the question any differently. Are you getting it now, or?
I've got something to start with, see how I do.
Okay.
First of all, most of the open source licenses, which is, when we're talking about open source licenses, we're talking about copyright, we're not talking about trademark. So open source licenses, generally the license prevents anyone from patenting anything that's in the license.
Okay.
First of all, patents are only available to the inventor. Only the inventor can file for a patent. So you have to have written all the code that is new, novel, and not previously present in the industry, and something that someone skilled in the art couldn't come up with. It's a pretty high standard to come up with a patentable piece of software. So you got to be kind of in one of those proprietary shop environments where you didn't have a lot of collaboration. The people who contributed are pretty well defined. And they're doing it closed. They're doing it keeping the secrets in. Because once it's out, it's out. So the whole idea of getting the patent protection is that you've got a year from when it's been first put on sale or first been publicly released to get a patent protection on that stuff. Otherwise, it has been released. It's public domain. Cannot be patent protected. The separate issue is protecting your trademark, and that is a whole different world, and nothing about the licenses has an impact on the trademark. Trademarks get licensed. So generally each project has a trademark licensing page somewhere on their website that says what's permitted on a conditional use license. So if you download and use Ubuntu as part of a vertical stack that you're now shoving out the door, they've got rules by which how you can display the Ubuntu name as part of your advertising and what's in your stack.
Okay, yeah.
That hit it?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
So real quick, I will say also the Impact Hub is awesome. I'm one of the founding Bitcoin Hub guys. Yeah,
Great.
So I love the Impact Hub. Quick question in regards to the technology of Bitcoin and how people are now using blockchain technology.
Yep.
And they are using it in a way to do a token sell, is what they're calling it, a pre-sell of a token to fund the development of open source development. Your take, viability on that movement?
I actually put it in the same box as Kickstarters and some other funding approaches as to whether how the payment technology works is to me irrelevant. The issue I find is more when you're dealing with open source communities, whether they're going to accept the code that finally gets funded, and that's kind of the issue. The Joomla project, for example, is facing that. We had one of our developers go out and do a Kickstarter campaign and raise $10,000 to reroute the core router. And long overdue. They're definitely a top priority project. Not something we could get our volunteers to just jump right in there and do. It had been on the wish list for a long time. And all of the people who were, got big distribution businesses or website construction businesses that are dependent on the software were more than happy to fund it. And so, the project was funded in a day. No big deal. But it puts a whole lot of pressure on the core team, and particularly the release manager, what to do when that pull request comes in. And all that political pressure and financial pressure that's on, do you compromise the standards of the project because you got someone pushing so hard, I've got a funding objective. And I think there are issues that all the open source projects can face in that respect. You kind of selling your soul a little bit.
Sure.
Did that hit it?
Yeah, I mean, more or less, yeah. I think you touched on the applications being built on top of or within the open, on this platform. Some are using it, for instance, Ethereum raised over $18 million to build this new open source platform, right?
Yes.
So the applications that are built on top of them, they're not the ones that are currently crowdfunding it, and they're trying to get Ethereum to plug it in and help build it out and make sure it works, kind of how you explained, what you just explained. But there's just a lot of these platforms coming out that are raising money to fund the development of just brand new platforms. And I don't think that's really been done in the past. And it's still pretty...
Another form of funding works well. It's surprising how many people pull it off. If you're thinking about doing an Indiegogo campaign or something like that, to launch whatever you're starting up, keep in mind that whatever vehicle you're using, it doesn't apply to the Bitcoin technology, but it does apply to Indiegogo and Kickstarter and some of those, that there is a deadline to reach your funding goal. Otherwise, all bets are off. And that the successful projects pre-sell. They are selling the concept not in their 30-day window, but far in advance. They're going around, if we build this, if we launch this campaign, would you buy it? You're building their mailing list. You're building all kinds of things so that once the project actually gets launched, that they're actually meeting their goal within hours or a day. And as a result, it gets very visible on the websites of those projects. It gets homepage presence of, this is hot, because the moment they kicked, within 2 hours, they're 40% of their goal. Well, now they're ultra surpassing their goal because everyone else is riding along on the coattails of the early investors. So planning your campaign before you launch is important in those worlds. It's part of what builds the credibility. They see that, oh my gosh, all these people have already poured in money, this must be a good thing. And therefore, they're right with them right off the cliff. More? Who wants a book? Who's the winner of the book?
I don't have any cards.
Oh, nobody wants the book. First one raises their hand.
Do we have people?
You two can fight over it. Actually, two of you, I'll give you two.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
I'm talking 3 more times this weekend. Tomorrow morning, Star Trek. If you like Star Trek, you're a fan of Star Trek, there will be about 8 clips with lessons on open source leadership, how to manage a larger project based on things learned from the 24th century looking back in time. So there's a lot of wisdom to be learned about managing from the big chair. Tomorrow afternoon is how to do presentations. And this is taking advantage of, I've been through a number of different public speaking courses, and in particular one that was out in San Francisco just a year ago. And there's a whole bunch of tips from a 3-day course that have been compressed into 1 hour. So that's that one. And finally is an open source hat trick. This is demonstrating the combination of using Joomla as a base layer to give you the ability to have a multilingual site as well as all the MVC compliant software base so that you can have a world of extensions. WordPress running within the Joomla site using the Joomla's user manager for, in essence, a single sign-on technique. But with shared stuff using the Joomla template, so it's a single template across both sites. But WordPress doing what WordPress does best, which is managing the blogs. And you can still use WordPress widgets and so forth with that. So you get the best of both worlds in terms of 6,000 plus 8,000 extensions together for 14,000 options to how to put something interesting together. And then finally, Logic, the marketing automation that I had mentioned. This is a working example of how Logic collects the data for how people travel through a website, and you can see paths to put together. So that's on Saturday. Thank you very much. Have a great lunch.